If Satan believed God, why don't we? In the 3rd chapter of Genesis, just after the fall of man, God speaks a curse over the serpent. One sentence, one prophecy, the first prophecy in the entire Bible. And from the moment those words were spoken, something began. A war. Not for territory, not for nations, and not for thrones, at least not yet. A war over a single word. A word so small that most readers walk right past it. A word so quiet that entire sermons can be preached without ever stopping to define it. The word is seed. In Hebrew, zera. In Greek, sperma. From Genesis to Revelation, the single word forms a thread that ties every major covenant, prophecy, and promise in the Bible together. Satan believed God meant it. He spent the next 4,000 years trying to destroy what God promised. The question is whether we believe God meant it. In the original language, the word seed carries weight. In Hebrew, zera means more than a metaphor. It can mean physical reproductive seed or offspring. It can mean lineage, and it can also mean a covenant line stretching across generations. In Genesis chapter 1, the same word is used for seed of plants that bring forth after their kind. In Genesis 4, it's used for the appointed offspring of Eve. In Genesis 38, as we'll see, it's used in an unmistakably physical term. In Greek, sperma carries the same range. Reproductive seed, descendants, a line, a promised one. And in the Aramaic of Daniel, the same root appears in a very unsettling context, one this video will mark. 12 passages, one word, one war, and one promised king. Section 1, Genesis 3:15, the first prophecy. Adam and Eve have eaten from the tree God forbade. Their eyes are opened, they hide, and God comes walking in the cool of the day, and the world that was good is now ruptured. Curses are pronounced. But before God curses the man or the woman, he curses the serpent. And in that curse, long before Abraham, Moses, David, or Isaiah, the very first prophecy in the Bible is spoken. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Genesis 3:15. Read it slowly. God does not say there will be a general conflict between good and evil. He does not say humanity will struggle with sin in the abstract. He says seed, zera, thy seed, her seed, 2 lines, 2 lineages, one coming deliverer who will crush the serpent's head. The Hebrew word is zera, and it's the same word that's used for plants in Genesis 1. The same word that will be used for offspring throughout the Torah. The same word that will appear in nearly every major covenant God makes. And from this moment on, the entire Bible is moving toward the arrival of one specific seed. If the serpent believed the prophecy, this proto-evangelium, what would he do if he believed it? He would attack the seed. He would attack the people from which that seed would spring forth. Section 2, Genesis 4:25, another seed appointed. The very next chapter, Adam knows Eve biblically. She conceives, she bears Cain and then Abel. Cain becomes a tiller of the ground, and Abel becomes a keeper of sheep. They bring their offerings, and God respects Abel's, but he does not respect Cain's. And in a field, in the first generation of fallen humanity, Cain raises up and kills his brother. The righteous son is dead. Then comes Genesis 4, verse 25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. There it is again. Seed, zera. Eve names her son in language taken directly from the promise. Another seed, appointed, instead of Abel, the first righteous son had been killed, and God had replaced that seed with another. A pattern is being established that the entire Bible will repeat. God promises, the line is attacked, and God preserves. That's the pattern. Section 3, Genesis 6, a strange corruption. At this point, generations pass. Mankind multiplies on the face of the earth, and then comes a passage so strange that most teachers skip it. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6, 1-4. The phrase sons of God, B'nai HaElohim, is used elsewhere in the Old Testament for heavenly beings. The result of these unions is not ordinary children. They are Nephilim, giants, mighty men, men of renown. Then the text says something even stranger. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. All flesh. And then in the middle of universal corruption, one man is described in a strange way. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Genesis 6:9. Perfect. The word used is tamim, whole, complete, and unblemished in his generations, or genealogy. This passage holds more than this video can carry. The relationship between the sons of God, the corruption of flesh, the meaning of tamim, and what it tells us about the war over the seed. That will be a subject for the next video in this series. For now, mark it. Genesis 6 is on the chart. Section 4, Genesis 9:9, the covenant after the flood. The flood comes, the earth is wiped. Noah and his wife, his sons, and their wives, 8 souls survive in the ark. And when Noah steps off the ark onto a cleansed world, God speaks again. And behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. Genesis 9:9. There it is, Zerah, seed. After judgment, after the world is washed clean, the first thing God does is reaffirm the line. He establishes covenant with Noah and his Zerah, his seed. The promise survives. The line continues. The word repeats. Section 5, Abraham, the seed of nations. Again, generations pass. Babel rises, Babel falls, the nations scatter, and then God speaks to one man in one city in Mesopotamia. His name is Abram, and God will later rename him Abraham. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will shew thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. Genesis 12, 1-2. Then, when Abraham arrives in the land, God speaks to him again. Unto thy seed will I give this land. Genesis 12:7. Seed, Zerah. And now, for the first time, the seed is tied to land. The promises multiply. In Genesis 15, God takes Abraham outside, shows him the stars, and tells him, So shall thy seed be. In Genesis 17, God establishes an everlasting covenant with Abraham and thy seed after thee, in their generations. In Genesis 22, after Abraham offers Isaac on the mountain, God swears by himself, In blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Genesis 22, 17-18. Seed, the same word in every covenant, and it narrows. From Abraham to Isaac, not Ishmael. From Isaac to Jacob, not Esau. From Jacob's 12 sons, the royal line will go through one, Judah. The promise is no longer general. It becomes specific. It's moving toward one person. Section 6, Genesis 38, raise up seed. Judah has 3 sons. The first is named The text says he was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Then Judah speaks to his second son, Onan. Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. Genesis 38:8. The Hebrew phrase is hakem zerah, raise up seed. The same word used in Genesis 3, the same word used in the covenant with Abraham, now used in the most physical, unmistakable sense possible. A kinsman duty to produce offspring to continue a brother's name. But Onan refuses. He knows the seed would not be counted as his own. So he goes through the motions of the union without fulfilling it. And the text says what he did displeased the Lord, and the Lord slew him also. And this story gets uncomfortable. It's the kind of passage that gets skipped in Bible studies and in sermons. But it is in the Bible for a reason.
It is in the Bible for a reason.
And the reason is the seed. Tamar, the widow, takes matters into her own hands. Through a series of events the video need not detail, she conceives by Judah himself, and she gives birth to twin sons. One of them is named Perez, and Perez will become the great-grandfather of Boaz, who will be the great-grandfather of Jesse, who will become the father of David, and David will be the ancestor of Jesus Christ. What looked like a side story in Genesis is actually the line of the Messiah hanging by a thread. God promised, the line was threatened, and then God preserved. That pattern repeats. The word repeats. Section 7, Ruth 4, the line to David. Centuries later, in the days when the judges ruled, a Moabite woman named Ruth follows her Israelite mother-in-law back to Bethlehem. She gleans in the fields of a man named Boaz. Boaz is a kinsman redeemer of the family. Boaz marries Ruth, and she bears a son named Obed. The book of Ruth closes with a genealogy that most readers skim. And Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. Ruth 4:21 through 22. The line, traced from Perez in Genesis 38, has now reached the king of Israel. The seed is moving toward the throne. Section 8, 2 Samuel 7, the throne seed. David is now king. He sits in a palace of cedar. The ark of God still dwells in a tent. And David wants to build God a house, but God sends a prophet, Nathan, with a different message. When thy days be fulfilled, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers. I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. 2 Samuel 7, verses 12 through 16. Seed, Zerah, now attached to a throne, and not just any throne, a throne eternally, forever. The promise to David is specific. A son will come from his own body. That son will sit on his throne, and that son and that throne will never end. For a moment, this looks like Solomon. Solomon is David's son. Solomon builds the temple, he sits on the throne, but then Solomon dies. The kingdom splits, Israel falls, Judah falls, and the temple is destroyed, and the throne in Jerusalem sits empty for centuries. So either God's promise failed, or another son of David is coming. The prophets chose the second answer. Isaiah promises a child upon the throne of David. Jeremiah promises a righteous branch from David, and Ezekiel promises one shepherd set over God's people. Centuries later, then, an angel will tell a virgin in Nazareth that her son will be given the throne of his father David, and that son shall reign over the house of Jacob forever. The seed has become the king. Section 9, Daniel 2:43, the seed of men. The setting shifts. The years of the kings have ended. The nation has been carried into exile, and a young Jewish prophet stands before Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, to interpret a dream. The dream is a great image: a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, and legs of iron, feet of iron mixed with miry clay. Daniel explains that the image represents kingdoms, Babylon, and those that will come after, but the final stage is very strange. The feet and toes are iron mixed with clay. And then in Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, the prophet says something unsettling. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Daniel 2, verse 43. Daniel 2 is written in Aramaic. The phrase is Zera Anasha, the seed of men. The word is the same root that we've been tracking since Genesis, and the language is strange. Daniel does not say alliances. He does not say political treaties. He doesn't say marriages between dynasties either. He says the seed of men mingling with something else. This passage too holds much more than this video can carry. The relationship between Daniel 2, Genesis 6, and the strong delusion spoken by Paul in 2 Thessalonians. That's the subject of the next video. For now, mark it. The seed of men is on the chart. What Daniel does say plainly is what happens next. A stone cut without hands strikes the image. The kingdoms of man are crushed, and the kingdom of God fills the whole earth. The kingdoms of man do not improve. They're replaced. Section 10, Matthew 1, the seed arrives. The Old Testament closes. 400 years pass. The next book of the Bible opens. The book of the generations of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Matthew 1:1. Read that line again. The opening sentence of the New Testament is not a sermon. It's not a parable. It's a genealogy claim. Jesus is presented in the very first verse as the son of David and the son of Abraham. Two promises, two seed lines, both converging on one person. What follows is a list. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat Judah and his brethren, Judah begat Perez of Tamar, Perez begat Hezron, Hezron begat Ram, and on through Boaz of Ruth, and Obed, and Jesse, and David the king. Every name in the list is a name already crossed in the trail of seed. Abraham, Judah, Perez, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. The genealogy of Matthew is the proof that the line survived. The promise made in Genesis 3 has reached its person. Section 11. Galatians 3:16. Paul names the seed. Decades after the resurrection, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to the church in Galatia. The Galatians are being told that they must keep the law of Moses to be saved. Paul argues that the promise made to Abraham was always about faith. And then he says something that should stop every reader. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. Galatians 3:16. Paul builds an argument on a single grammatical detail. Not seeds, not plural. Seed, singular. The Greek word here that Paul used was sperma, and Paul tells us the singular form was deliberate. The promise to Abraham always was pointing forward to one person, and that person is Christ Jesus. Notice what Paul is doing. He's not spiritualizing. He's doing the opposite. He's reading the Hebrew text literally enough to argue from the number of a noun. He's treating one word as a load-bearing pillar of doctrine. If an apostle of Jesus Christ refuses to spiritualize the word seed, if he builds the gospel itself on a singular form of one noun, then the burden falls on the modern reader who wants to spiritualize the rest. If Paul took Zerah literally, what about throne? What about land? What about Israel itself? And what about Jerusalem? And what about 1,000 years? The seed is Christ, and Paul will not let his readers forget this. Section 12. Revelation 12:17. The dragon still wars. The Bible closes with a vision. The Apostle John, exiled on Patmos, sees a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars on her head. She's with child, and she cries, travailing in birth. The second wonder appears, and it's a red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. The dragon stands before the woman, ready to devour the child as soon as it's born. Then the child is delivered, a man-child, who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron. The child is then caught up to God and unto his throne. And then in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, the dragon is named. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Revelation 12:9. That old serpent, the same serpent from Genesis 3. The war that began in the garden was never ended. And the very last chapter of the seed war is still being written. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which kept the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Revelation 12:17. Her seed. The Greek word is sperma, the same word Paul used in Galatians 3, the same word traced back through Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic that has appeared in every major covenant since Genesis 3. The serpent is still attacking the seed. The war began in a garden, and it's still being fought in our generation. So let's step back and see the pattern. Look at the trail. Genesis 3, the seed of the woman, the first prophecy, and in Genesis 4, another seed is appointed in place of the murdered righteous son. Genesis 6, as all flesh is corrupted, one man is preserved. Genesis 9, the covenant with Noah and his seed. And then Abraham, seed promised, land given, nations blessed. From there, Genesis 38, the messianic line preserved through Tamar and Perez, Ruth. Then the line reaches David. 2 Samuel 7, the throne forever. Daniel 2, the strange seed of men. In Matthew 1, the genealogy arrives at Christ. Galatians 3, Paul names the seed singular. And Revelation 12, the dragon still wars against her seed. One word, one war, one promised king. The truth is that the same God who said seed in Genesis 3 also said throne to David, land to Abraham, Israel to the prophets, 1,000 years to John, and forever, repeatedly, to all of them. If the word seed meant what it said, and Paul tells us it did, then the rest of God's words mean what they said too. Most Christians believe in God, but that's not the same thing as believing God. When God says serpent, do we believe serpent? When God tells us about Abraham's land, do we believe that? When God says Israel, do we believe Israel and Jerusalem when he says Jerusalem? When God says 1,000 years, do we believe 1,000 years? And when God says forever, do we believe forever? The gospel itself depends on literal promises that were given. A real fall and a real curse, a real serpent and a real seed, a real virgin and a real cross, a real burial, and praise the Lord, a real resurrection, a real ascension, and a real return of a real king. If the cross was literal, why would the throne be symbolic? If the tomb was literal, why would the rain be a metaphor? If the resurrection was literal, why would the kingdom be an allegory? The same God who kept the promise of the seed will keep the promise of the throne. The same God who preserved the line through Noah will preserve his word through his history. The same God who brought Messiah the first time will bring him the second time. Satan believed God enough to attack her seed for 4,000 years up till now. The question is whether we believe God enough to wait for the king.
You know what? You got a really good point.
And there are 2 passages in this video that were marked but not opened. Genesis 6, Daniel 2, verse 43. The sons of God, the corruption of all flesh, Noah being perfect in his generations, and the iron mixed with miry clay, the seed of men mingling with something the text doesn't name. These 2 passages read together tell a story that the next video in this series will trace in full. A story about what the Apostle Paul called the strong delusion, about a lie that the last generation will believe, about why the world is now talking about beings from the sky as if they were friends, about the days of Noah and what Jesus meant when he said, the last days would look just like them. Watch for the next video, please, and if you like this, subscribe to our channel and don't miss the next one. Maranatha.